7 times you should stay silent and let karma handle it. Have you ever found yourself in this situation? You have just been attacked? Someone has lied about you or even smeared your reputation, and the first instinct that rises in your mind is, I have to explain. I have to prove myself. I have to speak up right now. That's the natural reaction of a human being when we are pushed into being misunderstood or hurt. But then the more you try to explain, the more you try to defend yourself, the weaker you begin to feel. It's as if the more you speak, the more your words fuel others to twist further, while you slowly exhaust yourself in a meaningless battle. Silence is no longer a weakness in a noisy world, but a strategy. You can see this in the workplace. Many people would fire back immediately when a colleague tries to mock you in front of everyone. But the entire room is shaken if you sit there calmly with a slight smile and say nothing. They wonder, why isn't he reacting? What does he know that he doesn't need to justify himself? In that moment, your silence becomes a weapon, a form of strength that's hard to grasp. I've gone through many stages in life where I was put in situations that demanded I speak up. Misunderstood at work, doubted in friendships, and even moments of being looked down upon within the family. I tried to explain most of the time, but I felt lost. On the other hand, when I chose silence, focusing instead on action time, and truth became my allies. Slowly I realized a more profound truth: you don't need to speak to prove you are right. You only need to live rightly, and the truth will rise on its own. Stoic philosophy has reminded us of this for more than 2,000 years. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." Simple yet profound. You don't need debate to defend yourself. You only need to hold firmly to your principles and let time and karma do the rest. The difference becomes clear here. The weak react, and the intense choose silence. The weak crave recognition to be cleared instantly. The strong understand that nothing is more enduring than truth, and nothing is harsher than karma. When you remain silent, you are not giving up. You are handing the task to another force, the justice of time. In today's video, we will walk through 7 specific situations, moments when keeping silent protects your energy and your dignity, and lets the other side fall into the trap they set. This is not the silence of avoidance, but the silence of control of inner strength. And before we begin, I want to invite you, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that button now. This is where you'll find stories and simple, influential philosophies to help you stand firm against the storms of life. If this video resonates with you, please like and share it, because someone out there may also need this message. So then, in those countless moments when you want to scream to defend yourself, what are the 7 situations where you must stay silent and let karma take care of the rest? Let's begin with the first situation: when you are lied about and slandered. Situation 1: when you are lied about and slandered. In life, few things feel more painful and unjust than when someone fabricates stories attaching falsehoods to your name. It's like a knife piercing your honor, and the first reflex is almost always this: to defend, prove, and explain immediately. But the harder you try to justify yourself, the deeper you sink into their trap. Because those who spread lies are not searching for truth. They are searching for your reaction. Imagine yourself at work, and suddenly you hear a rumor that you stole a colleague's idea. Your heart pounds, your blood rises, and you want to burst into the meeting room and shout, "It wasn't me, I never did that." But the more you explain, the more you try to pull others to your side, the more suspicious you begin to look. People start thinking, why is he panicking if he didn't do it? And just like that, you turn yourself into a witness against yourself. Stoic philosophy shows us another way. Marcus Aurelius once reminded, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not right, do not do it." This is the compass. You do not need to prove yourself to the crowd. You only need to continue living and working with integrity. Truth carries a quality that lies never will endurance. Lies may spread fast like the wind, but they eventually fade. Truth creeps, yet it always returns to its rightful place. I recall a real story about a former colleague of mine, let's call him James. One time, James was falsely accused of breaking procedure and causing losses to the company. The rumor spread quickly and everyone began to look at him differently. His first reflex was to prove immediately that he was innocent, but instead he chose another path: silence. He didn't argue, he didn't blame, he focused on his work, continued doing what was right, and let time reveal the truth. A few weeks later, the truth surfaced. The accuser was exposed for his long history of manipulation and lies. And James, through his calm silence, not only preserved his dignity, but also gained greater respect from his colleagues. That is the power of silence. When you choose silence, you are not siding with lies. You are handing the matter over to karma, to the justice of time. Liars always live inside the chaos of their falsehoods. Sooner or later, they become entangled in the very web they spun. So what must we remember when we are slandered? First, trust in the long road. Lies may wound in the short term, but truth always holds the greater strength. Second, hold fast to your values and principles. When you know clearly who you are, no rumor can define you. Third, let your actions speak louder than words. Let your character, your consistency, and your daily work become your answer. One day the truth will return, and when it does, you will be vindicated and stronger because you refuse to let others drag you to their level. Silence in this situation is not avoidance, it is control. You control yourself, you control your energy, and you leave the rest to time and karma. And from falsehood, we move to an even more bitter reality: betrayal. Nothing hurts more than when those close to you, friends, loved ones, people you trusted, turn their backs. And so the second situation will be when you face betrayal, and why silence in that moment becomes the most potent response. Situation 2, when you are betrayed. If lies from the outside can wound your honor, betrayal cuts directly into your heart. Because betrayal does not come from strangers, it comes from friends, family, and those to whom you once trusted. And when it happens, it feels as if the ground beneath you collapses, leaving behind an emptiness hard to put into words. The first reflex is often confrontation. Why did you do this? Or do you realize how much you've destroyed me? We want them to admit guilt, to recognize the pain we are carrying. But the truth is that the betrayer had already justified their actions long before they struck. They may see it as a reasonable choice, or worse, they knew fully and still did it. In either case, your explanations only cause the wound to bleed further. Stoicism teaches us that suffering often does not lie in the event, but in how we respond. Seneca once wrote, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Betrayal is that friction. It is painful, but it shines a light on who truly deserves to stand by us. I remember the story of a woman, let's call her Sarah. Sarah had a close friend of more than 10 years with whom she shared both dreams and insecurities. But one day, Sarah discovered that this friend had revealed her private secrets and even sabotaged her chance of promotion at work. At first, Sarah wanted to confront her and say everything boiling inside, but then she chose silence. No arguments, no drama, just a quiet withdrawal. And the striking part was this: her silence unsettled the other person. They had prepared themselves for a fight, for accusations and shouting, but when Sarah did not react, they no longer knew how to face themselves. Silence became a mirror, forcing them to hear the echo of their actions. That is why in betrayal, silence is not weakness, it is a refusal. Refusal to give more energy to someone unworthy. Refusal to let pain dictate your words and actions. And refusal to let betrayal define who you are. So what must you remember when facing betrayal? First, accept the truth. The betrayer has already shown you who they are, not the image you once believed. Second, don't waste words explaining yourself to someone who has chosen to turn away. Your silence will speak louder than any argument. And finally, walk away. Silence helps you keep your dignity, and leaving enables you to protect your peace. In the end, you are not the one who loses. They are the ones who fail the chance to walk alongside a loyal and honest soul. The emptiness they feel afterward is nothing but the echo of karma. And when you understand this, you will see that silence in the face of betrayal is the deepest revenge, not through shouting or tears, but through the calmness of walking away. But if betrayal comes from those close to us, something else from outsiders also shakes us: insults. Lies may distort your image, betrayal may break your trust, but insults strike directly at your dignity. And that leads us to the third situation, when silence becomes a shield against public humiliation. Situation 3, when you are publicly insulted. If betrayal is a knife to the back, public insult is a blow to the face delivered right in front of everyone. It not only tests your pride, but it also tests your composure. Sometimes a sarcastic remark, a mocking joke, or even a single cruel comment can sting more than a punch, because its purpose is not only to hurt you, but to make you react in a way the whole world can see. I recall a company party where a man had just been promoted. As everyone congratulated him, a jealous colleague sneered, "Looks like anyone can get promoted these days." The entire room went silent. All eyes turned toward him, waiting for an explosion. But he didn't react. No defense, no forced laugh, no anger, only a calm smile and silence. At that moment, he not only preserved his dignity, but also made the offender expose his pettiness to everyone else. For as Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." In truth, public insult is a trap. If you become angry, you have stepped onto the stage they prepared. Your response is no longer strength, but entertainment. If you argue back, you do not make them smaller, you only bring yourself down to their level. Silence, on the other hand, is a refusal to play that game. It is like a transparent wall. You hear it, you feel it, but you do not allow the toxic words to break through and poison your mind. And you certainly do not allow them to steal your peace. Stoicism teaches us that no one can insult you without giving them that power. An insult becomes real only if you let it pierce your sense of self. But if you stand firm, letting it fall without sticking, those words are nothing but passing wind. Picture this: someone throws out a mocking comment in a public space. The crowd looks at you, waiting for your reaction. You could choose anger or argument, look them in the eye, smile, and remain silent. That silence confuses the room. It creates a void where everyone starts to compare who has truly lost control here. And the answer is not you. To handle an insult, remember 3 things. First, identify the purpose. They are not seeking truth, only attention. Second, let your silence speak. A composed face carries more power than 1,000 justifications. And finally, hold to your values. Those with self-respect do not need to prove it, for their calmness is proof enough. An insult, when met with silence, falls into emptiness. The one who casts the stone will see only their dirty hand, while you remain standing untouched by their low tactics. And once you have endured lies, betrayal, and public humiliation, you realize there is still another test, more subtle, more manipulative. It is when you are dragged into the game of those who pretend to be victims, weeping to hide the truth and twisting the story so that you become the one at fault. That is the 4th situation, when silence becomes your only weapon against the performance of false victims. Situation 4, when facing those who pretend to be victims. If public insult is a direct blow, then playing the victim is a hidden weapon, subtle, manipulative, and much more complex to resist. Because it not only challenges your composure, but also challenges fairness in the eyes of others. Imagine a colleague who is always late on deadlines. Instead of taking responsibility, they shed tears claiming they are under pressure, mistreated. And then when you give honest feedback, suddenly you become the villain of the story. In the eyes of others, they are the weak victim, while you are the cruel aggressor. The more you explain and reason, the more you help them build the perfect performance. This is the trap. When you argue and fight to prove yourself, you have already become an unwilling actor in their play. And the more you justify, the more the truth fades into the background. Epictetus once reminded us, Complaining never does any good. Those who play the victim don't complain about finding solutions. They complain about attracting attention and recruiting allies. And the truth is, audiences are always more moved by tears than reason. That is why the more you explain, the more you lose. This is when silence becomes the ultimate weapon. Silence is not surrender, it is a refusal to add fuel to the performance. You are no longer a supporting actor. You step off the stage and leave them alone with their role. And in time, the truth reveals itself. No one can play the victim forever. They will repeat the same script repeatedly, and eventually the audience will see the pattern. I remember a story about Rachel, a skilled and principled employee. She had a colleague who always avoided responsibility by crying and shifting blame. At first, Rachel tried to explain, provide evidence, and speak directly. But every time it ended badly, she was labeled harsh, while the other person gained sympathy until Rachel decided to stay silent. No more explanations, no more arguments. She did her work well, keeping her composure. A few months later, even those who once defended the victim began to notice whenever there was a problem, that person always had a new excuse, a new story to blame others. The mask fell off without Rachel ever touching it. You see, Rachel's silence not only protected her from emotional traps, but it was also a quiet declaration. I am not part of this game. So what should you do when facing someone who pretends to be a victim? First, do not try to explain. They are not listening, they are only performing. Second, maintain the mindset of an observer. Watch the play, but do not let yourself get absorbed into the emotions. And finally, trust in the power of repetition. Once, twice, others may believe them. However, everyone will recognize the familiar script by the third or fourth time. Silence in this case is like a mirror. You do not shatter their mask, you let them see themselves in the reflection. And that is the harshest punishment, to live forever with the role they have created. When you understand this, you realize silence is not only a defense, it is armor that protects you from manipulation and an invisible sword that ensures the truth eventually comes to light. But then the question arises, what happens when you are no longer insulted or tricked into a performance, but instead, you are ignored, overlooked, and taken for granted as if you will always be there? That is a quieter pain, leading us to situation 5, when your value is underestimated. Situation 5, when your value is underestimated. If those who pretend to be victims drag you into a false play, then being undervalued is like a slow, quiet scratch that wears you down from within. It comes with no explosion, no shock, just silence from the other side. And yet that silence can be the heaviest of all. Have you ever felt this? You're always the one who texts first, always the one who makes the call, who remembers birthdays, who asks how they're doing, who shares joy and sorrow. But the moment you stop doing all those things, the other side suddenly goes silent. No one asks if you are okay. No one seeks you out. And it's in that moment you realize perhaps you were never truly valued. You were simply convenient. This is the subtle trap of an unbalanced relationship. The more you give, the more they see it as something owed. Seneca once said, "Time discovers truth." And sometimes the truth is that you are being taken for granted even while you're still there, still giving. I remember the story of Jake, a kind man. Jake was the type of friend everyone would want. He remembered special days, showed up when needed, and always listened. But one day he realized something painful: no one would text if he didn't take the initiative. If he disappeared, the gatherings would disappear too. At first he blamed himself, thinking perhaps his friends were busy, but slowly he understood he wasn't appreciated. He was only used. And instead of arguing or begging, Jake chose silence. He withdrew his presence. And the result was clear: those who truly cared reached out to him. The others faded from his life without needing a goodbye. Silence here is no longer a defensive wall, but a test of truth. You don't need to accuse, you don't need to demand, you only need to stop. And that silence will quickly separate those who value you from those who only use you. But this is not a bitter silence. It is mature silence. because you no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. You understand actual value is not granted by others. It is lived and held by you. So when you are underestimated, remember three things. Do not chase. The more you chase, the more you lower yourself. Do not explain. If they couldn't see your value while you were here, they won't see it when you leave. Let your silence echo. The emptiness you leave behind will speak louder than any justification. Silence in this situation is how you reclaim your position. It transforms being taken for granted into being lost. And when they finally realize how important you were, it is already too late. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Let your actions prove your worth, not your words." And in this case, your silence is the most substantial proof. But then comes a larger question. What happens when you are not only undervalued, but when someone deliberately provokes you, tries to ignite your anger and pushes you to lose control so that they win? At that point, silence is no longer just defense, but armor against provocation. And that brings us to situation 6, when you are publicly provoked. Situation 6, when you are publicly provoked. If being undervalued causes a quiet, lingering pain, then being publicly provoked is like a punch to the face in front of everyone. It makes your cheeks burn, your heart race, and every instinct screams, "React now." But that very moment is the actual test of self-control. Picture a workplace meeting. You've just completed a complex project and the team is praised. Suddenly, a colleague makes a jab. Probably just luck, right? The room goes silent. All eyes turn to you, waiting for your reaction. If you fire back quickly, trading words, the crowd will remember the argument, not your achievement. But if you remain silent, meeting their eyes calmly, a faint smile on your lips, you not only protect your dignity, but you also force the provocateur to lose face because their attempt to diminish you has failed. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When someone provokes you publicly, they aim to drag you into the mud. Silence is your way of refusing that invitation. By not entering their game, you've already won before it begins. I recall the story of Adam, an employee in a large company. He had a colleague who loved to attack with sarcastic remarks during meetings. At first, Adam always reacted. He argued, defended himself, tried to prove his worth. But the more he reacted, the more drained he became, and the more satisfied his colleague grew. Until one day Adam changed. When the provocation came, he sat still, his gaze calm, a faint smile on his lips. No sighs, no eye-rolling, no gestures of irritation, just gentle silence. And that silence unsettled his colleague because the fire had no fuel. Gradually, the attack stopped. Not because Adam won with words, but because he won with stillness. The hardest part in these situations is not responding, it is restraint. Because restraint demands that you sacrifice the right now to protect the long term. People may remember a sharp comeback for a few days, but will respect your composure for years. So how can you maintain silence when publicly provoked? First, take a deep breath. A slow breath is enough to pull you out of an impulsive reaction. Second, meet the provocateur's eyes, not with anger, but with observation, calm as though you're watching a cheap play. Finally, let the silence linger. That silence becomes a weight they must carry while you remain standing still, unshaken like stone. Epictetus once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Silence is the most evident proof of that truth in the face of public provocation. You cannot stop someone from attacking you, but you can completely prevent yourself from being dragged down. And once you've learned to stay silent under provocation, you begin to discover a deeper level of strength when silence becomes armor, helping you stand tall, even in the face of intimidation and threats. Because public provocation is only a small test threats, and intimidation are the larger game where silence transforms into a presence so powerful it makes the other side think twice. And that brings us to situation 7, when you face threats and intimidation. Situation 7, when you face threats and intimidation. Suppose public provocation is a noisy game before the crowd. In that case, intimidation is like a confrontation in a closed room with no applause, no audience, only the heavy tension between two people. And here silence is no longer just a subtle choice, but a survival weapon. Imagine being in an important meeting and suddenly your direct manager uses a sharp tone to corner you. I know you're not capable of handling this project right. All eyes turn toward you. If you rush to explain, you reveal insecurity. If you lose your temper, you hand them control. But if you remain silent, taking a slow breath, holding your gaze steady without trembling, you send a powerful signal: I am not defeated. Silence in these situations is not an escape, but a declaration that you refuse to play by the opponent's rules. An intimidator only hopes for your reaction, fear, anger, or panic. When you deny them that, the balance of power instantly shifts back to you. I recall the story of a young entrepreneur, Adam, who was threatened by a major partner during negotiations. If you don't accept these terms, we'll make sure your career ends here. Anyone would feel shaken, but Adam sat still, his eyes steady, unshaken, silent for a few seconds, then calmly turned the page of his document without answering. That silence was like a counterstrike. It showed he refused to be controlled. And in the end, the partner lost composure, exposing weakness in the negotiation. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "True strength is keeping the mind from being disturbed by anything external." When someone threatens you, they do not truly control you, they only control your reaction. And when you keep silent, you break that illusion. But silence is not just the absence of words. It is also how you compose your body, a steady posture, calm eyes, even breathing. All of it creates an aura that forces the intimidator to wonder, what is he thinking? Why isn't he afraid? Why is he so calm? That uncertainty is what plants real fear is. Notice this: those who rely on intimidation are often loud, dramatic, and eager to create pressure. But the louder they get, the more exaggerated their gestures, the more frightening your opposing silence becomes. It is like a bottomless void that cannot control. Epictetus said, "No one can harm you without your consent." Silence in the face of intimidation is the highest expression of this truth. It shows you refuse to give anyone else the power to rule your mind. And when you can remain silent, even under intimidation, you reach another level. Silence is no longer a defense, but a declaration. It says you do not only control your reaction, but you also control the entire game. Because in that moment, the other side reveals their weakness. Repeated threats, a rising voice, gestures out of control, while you remain still like a rock standing in the storm. You have witnessed a journey from silence in the face of lies, betrayal, contempt, insult, and intimidation, a journey where silence is no longer passivity, but the art of control. The height of this art is when you finally realize that you don't need to win with words because you have already won with presence. And now we conclude where I want us to look back at the entire picture, draw out the vital lessons from Stoicism, and understand why sometimes silence not only saves you in each situation, but also shapes the course of your life. Walking through all 7 situations, you see one common thread. Every attacker wants one thing: your reaction. The liar wants you to rush into justification. The betrayer wants you to explode in anger. The public insulter wants you to burst out so the crowd can applaud. The victim player wants you to fall into the emotional trap so they can keep the role of the innocent while you become the villain. The one who underestimates you wants you to chase after them, trying to prove your worth. The provocateur wants you to shout so they can control the story. And finally, the intimidator wants you to tremble so that they can arrange the board in their favor. In all of these moments, silence becomes the counter-strike. Not silence out of weakness, but silence because you have seen through the game. Silence to prevent the other from touching your mind. Silence to preserve your energy for truly worthy battles. Silence to let them reveal themselves, expose their weaknesses, and become a spectacle, while you remain firm. Looking deeper, you will see that Stoicism has spoken of this for thousands of years. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not true, do not say it. If it is not just, do not do it." The words sound simple, yet they form an entire system. Let your values define you, not the voices of others. Epictetus emphasized, "No one can harm you unless you allow them." Harm only exists when you react in the way your opponent desires. And Seneca wrote, "Time reveals truth." Silence is the bridge between time and reality. From the perspective of practice, silence is not just a defensive reflex, but a skill that must be trained. Because humans are often driven by instinct, the instinct to fight back, explain, and be understood. Yet that instinct is also a chain dragging you into someone else's script. If you train yourself to pause, breathe, and choose silence at the right time, you will see that you can control 80% of the conflicts in life. Think about it, how many relationships have fractured because of one impulsive word? How many career opportunities have slipped away because of an unnecessary justification? How many moments have you regretted simply because you reacted too quickly? Silence may not guarantee immediate victory, but it always guarantees you do not shoot yourself in the foot. The lesson is this: silence is not the absence of words, but the presence of control. It keeps you from mistakes and gives you the upper hand. When you can hold silence in these 7 situations, you overcome individual clashes and build a self that is hard to shake. And that is the pinnacle. Stoicism points us toward an inner core unmoved by chaos. A mind no one can manipulate. A strength that does not need to be shouted for recognition. So then, after walking through these 7 situations, you've realized an important truth. We don't need to shout to prove we are strong. Sometimes it is silence itself that speaks the loudest. It shows you have matured and freed yourself from the need to win every minor clash. And when you choose silence, you are not losing. You are handing the battlefield over to time, truth, and karma. Picture yourself sitting in a meeting when someone deliberately attacks you with a sarcastic comment. If you react harshly, the whole room will remember when you lost your composure. But if you sit there, smile, and continue with your work, that silence will leave the attacker feeling empty. And everyone in the room will see the contrast clearly. One side heated, the other calm. You don't need to say anything, your presence has already answered. Or in love, when someone begins to underestimate you and no longer cherishes you as before. Many will beg, explain, or cry out to be understood. But the Stoic chooses differently: silence and departure. Let your absence become the lesson they must face. Because the truth is this: if someone only realizes your value once you are gone, then they were never truly worthy of you in the first place. Look at the bigger picture. Silence is also your declaration: I am in control of myself. In a world full of noise where everyone wants to speak and everyone wants to prove they are right, the one who knows how to stay silent becomes rare. And in that rarity, you become magnetic, a force others must respect. I want you to remember this: silence is not emptiness. Silence is a strategy. Silence is strength. Silence is the weapon of those who truly master themselves. If what I've shared in this video resonates with you, don't let the message end here. Turn it into a way of life. Practice silence when attacked, when used, when provoked, and most importantly, when your worth is no longer recognized. Every time you choose silence at the right moment, you build another layer of invisible armor, making yourself more challenging to be manipulated. And before you go, I have one final request. If you found this video meaningful, hit subscribe so you won't miss the following message. Share this video with a friend or a loved one who may need it now. They might be caught in a cycle of conflict. Just one reminder could help them reclaim their peace. Let this message spread, not with noise, but with powerful stillness. Because sometimes you don't need to shout for the world to listen. You only need to be silent and let that silence speak for everything. See you in the following video.